with 9 days off, the Knicks face a tough question. Who would they rather play, or who would they fare better against? Well, let's break it down. This is the RL Report with Ryan Luke. For starters, let's take a look at the potential OKC matchup. On the surface, doesn't look great because the Knicks are 0-6 against the Thunder over the last 3 years. This includes being 0-2 this year in the 2025-2026 season, and the point differential, however, might tell a little bit of a different story. In the two matchups, the Knicks were only a combined minus 14, as they lost 103-100 at home in Madison Square Garden, and then they lost 100-111 on the road at the Paycom Center. And again, that tells you maybe the Knicks aren't the best matchup for OKC. However, injuries are piling up for the Thunder, and this is mainly on their secondary creators, their other offensive options outside of SGA. And this is because AJ Mitchell, who we were seeing starting to ascend to a new level, a guy that a lot of teams were saying, hey, maybe if you give him his own team, he could become a future all-star. I saw people even make comments that, hey, this could be the next Jalen Brunson situation where he is stuck in a position under SGA where he's never going to reach his full potential, but if he gets the key somewhere else, he can be that guy. However, he's been out since Game 3, and I'd be interested to see if he returns, and if that happens, truly what percentage health he will be, since he's dealing with that right calf injury, and he hasn't even been questionable at all over these last few games. He has just been flat out ruled out early, which tells me he's not really even that close. Maybe they're banking on if OKC wins tonight over the Spurs and advances to the finals that, hey, maybe those 3 to 4 days rest will be enough to get him close to being back onto the court, or maybe even back onto the court at a, capped percentage of what he can be. And then alongside that, you have J-Dub, who we have seen very little of these playoffs. And unfortunately, I don't think it's great for the league. Obviously, you never want to see an all-star caliber guy, a guy who was so pivotal in OKC winning the championship last year over the Pacers, to be banged up. But obviously he hurt his hamstring, missed the entirety of the Lakers series, came back for a game in Game 6 against the Spurs. He did not look right. He did not look like himself. He very much reminded me of when OG Anunoby came back early against the Pacers from his hamstring injury in the 2024-2025 playoffs. And he just looked like a shell of himself. I mean, I saw someone on X said that he might as well have been the Holy Ghost out there, because you couldn't tell that he had any sort of impact on the game at all. It was like he was invisible. And I almost wonder if him being ruled out tonight in particular for the Thunder actually increases their odds of winning and advancing to the finals, because you don't have to worry about catering to him, and maybe those days off, like I said, with AJ Mitchell, might be able to give him some time to get right, at least not look like this completely hobbled player that we saw in Game 6 heading into a potential finals matchup. Additionally, alongside the injuries, there is something else I want to talk about, and that is how the Spurs have been throwing a lot of different looks at SGA, which can provide the Knicks with a lot of teach tape and a lot of things that they can kind of try to implement themselves, since they're going to have so much time to prepare. Yes, they're not going to know what team to prepare for, but as Landry Shamet said when he was talking to the Inside the NBA guys, you can drip things in slowly over those 9 days off that you have. That's what they did before the Cavs series, where, hey, we're going to prep a little bit for the Cavs this day, we're going to prep a little bit for the Pistons this day. The Knicks can do that with the Thunder and the Spurs. And I'm sure that they'll be watching, all of these games together, be able to look at the tape, and they'll be able to see all the different matchups and the different things that the Spurs are throwing at SGA to mess with him. For example, we've seen the Spurs throughout this series blitz any ball screens and sending doubles, which has really been effective at getting the ball out of SGA's hands, making him more of a facilitator. Now, he is a very good passer. When you're an elite scorer, you have to have that secondary skill to kind of counteract any sort of defense that may be chosen to limit your scoring in general. Now, though SGA has done a fantastic job so far with being able to swing the rock, not pushing it too much, his teammates haven't really been all that reliable when you consider everything. And I mean, the Spurs have been so effective at getting the ball out of his hands and making the other guys do damage. The Thunder are making their open looks at a hit or miss clip. If you take a look at NBA.com and you filter to their wide open metric, the Spurs against the Thunder in these 6 games are shooting 41% when there is no defender within 6 feet of them from 3. Now, that's an amazing clip. That's what you want. That shows that, if the Spurs or, the Knicks in the future are going to throw a double team or blitz SGA to try to get the ball out of his hands and make someone else punish them, that OKC is able to do that. The issue is that when the contest drops from no one within 6 feet to a defender within 4 to 6 feet, the Thunder only shoot 28% from 3, which is not great at all. And obviously, in a finals type situation, or really any playoff situation, you're not going to get that many wide open threes. So yes, they're converting on that wide open clip, but when there's any semblance of even a light contest, it's a very below average shooting performance. And that should worry the Thunder and also make the Knicks kind of think about, okay, maybe if we do decide to blitz down the road, we're going to have enough of an effort, enough length from our wings and Wingstop and OG and Mikal Bridges that we can make up ground and at least get a semi-contest on there because the Thunder haven't shot well when that's the case. And another option, and something we've seen the Spurs do really to a lot of success lately, is just play SGA straight up. I mean, obviously, the Spurs have the benefit of having one of the all-time great rim protectors at the back line in Victor Wembanyama, but Stephon Castle has done a fantastic job in those one-on-one situations with SGA. And this tells me that, okay, that's another option for the Knicks. Potentially, they could throw Hart at SGA. They could throw Shamet at SGA. I don't love Deuce McBride's matchup with SGA simply because it's 6'2". Yes, McBride is a good defender and he has a great wingspan, but I think the height differential and just SGA is so crafty that I don't particularly love that matchup. But you have Hart, you have Shamet, and then obviously you have Wingstop. You can throw Mikal at him for a possession. You can throw OG at him for a possession. And if you keep giving SGA these different looks, then it's going to be much tougher for him to get into a rhythm. We've seen this. Donovan Mitchell was talking about it after Jalen Brunson's game in Game 1 against the Cavs in the Eastern Conference Finals, where he just cooked James Harden over and over and over again. And he said, I'm not surprised. If you give an elite scorer or an elite offensive player the same look time after time, they're eventually going to figure it out. And that's what happened, is that Brunson kept getting the Harden matchup and he knew exactly what he wanted to do with it. And that is why it is so important to throw different matchups at SGA in a potential matchup between the Knicks and the Thunder. And I mean, to put this step further, SGA has just really struggled in general in this series. And while I don't think that that's necessarily going to continue, I think that there is some proof in the pudding and some things that the Knicks can implement. Like how in the series as a whole, SGA is shooting 38% from the field, and the way that Stephon Castle's been so physical and handsy, not allowing him to really get to his spot at all without much effort, I think is exactly what any team, or the Knicks in particular, need to do to slow down SGA and prevent him from getting to that mid-range spot, getting to where he can get a step on the defender and get downhill. You just need to really play physical and aggressive and make the refs decide how they're going to call that game and see how that's going to benefit you or SGA. Now, the biggest struggle for the Knicks in this series could potentially be the looming Mitchell Robinson situation. Obviously, he broke his pinky. He got surgery done already. They said he's going to play with something covering it up, hopefully for Game 1 of the finals. And yes, he's saying he'll be back. We don't know what level of play he's going to give you, and he really, quite frankly, hasn't been the same Mitchell Robinson we've seen in playoffs past. And the reason that this is huge is because with the way that SGA, Chet, some of these Thunder guards are able to get downhill, draw fouls, put you in such a tough position as a defender, if Karl Anthony Towns gets in foul trouble and Mitchell Robinson can't go, or he's not really himself, he's not really giving you any value, who do the Knicks rely on? Ariel Hukporti? I don't love that. I mean, Ariel Hukporti, even though he is a +7 against OKC this year, he's not a winning formula, and he potentially forces the Knicks into playing in an awkward position where maybe it's OG Anunoby at the 5, or even significant Jeremy Sohan minutes, who we haven't seen a whole lot of this season after the Knicks picked him up when he was on the buyout market. And I don't really want to have that first test of those lineups without a Karl Anthony Towns or without a Mitchell Robinson happen in the finals. So it's very key that Karl Anthony Towns, A, either doesn't pick up fouls if Mitchell Robinson is going to struggle and not be himself or just not play at all, or B, if Mitchell Robinson is going to be good enough to play, it is important and imperative that he protects himself and he keeps himself available so that if Cat does get in foul trouble due to his tendency to have some pretty dumb fouls, we saw it in Game 1 where during the Knicks run, OG Anunoby, I believe it was, had a wide open lane to throw down a dunk to cut into the lead, and Karl Anthony Towns just grabs Jared Allen's wrist and waves off the basket, and it's an away from the ball foul. So you can't have that happen in this series, especially against the Thunder, especially with the way that they get to the rim and they draw free throws and they get you in the bonus. They put you in foul trouble. That just cannot happen. And so it is very interesting to see, kind of how the Knicks would navigate that situation. Given, I do think it's important to note that if you do run that lineup with OG at the 5, the Knicks can still run a 5-out offense like they do with their starting lineup with Cat, Hart, Bridges, Brunson, and OG. The only thing is you probably have OG at the 5. You might slide Hart down to the 4, and then you could play a Bridges at the 3, Shamet at the 2, and Brunson at the 1, or a Brunson at the 1, McBride at the 2, Shamet at the 3, Bridges at 3, whatever you want to do. You can still run a 5-out offense, which is how they've been so effective, but I don't know if you can replace Cat's playmaking in that circumstance. And so it'll be interesting to see how the Knicks navigate that whole situation. And obviously with the way that the Thunder have played double big with Chet and Isaiah Hartenstein, the Knicks would get eaten alive. And I don't really love that potential matchup of playing small ball versus, double big. And I don't think it would be that the Knicks offense would necessarily be so fast and explosive that, you could play the double big lineup off the court. And lastly, I think something we have to take a look at when we evaluate the Thunder versus the Knicks in that potential matchup is that they have the experience of winning the championship last year. They call it championship DNA. That is one of the most important things that one single team or player can have when you're coming into, a winner-take-all series. And obviously, the Knicks might have just slightly more playoff games played throughout their entire roster, about 650 total playoff games for the Knicks versus just about 600 for the Thunder. That championship DNA, that thought process, that comfortability that okay, I won it last year with this same group of guys. What's stopping me from winning it again? I think could play a major role and have a major impact on how the series goes as a whole. But now that we've talked about the Thunder so much, I think that it's important we take a look at the Spurs matchup. And this one is a different story when we talk about how they fared in the regular season. The Knicks went 2-1 against the Spurs in the regular season with a total plus 34-point differential. And yes, this is including taking down the Spurs in the NBA Cup championship, which I know some people will argue, yes, Wembanyama was on a slight minutes restriction. He came off the bench. I totally understand that, and that's calculated into everything. But that was a playoff-like environment, and the Knicks just completely beat down the Spurs in that game. And really, as I said, 2-1, including that game during the regular season. The Knicks' only loss happened by 2 points nearly about a week after the NBA Cup championship, where Julian Champagnie had a masterclass. He hit 11 of 17 threes on his way to 36 points. Mind you, Wembanyama played in that game still. Wembanyama played in all 3 matchups, so it's not the type of situation where it's like, okay, the Knicks went 2-1, but they went 1-1 when Wemby was playing or something like that. They went 2-1. Wembanyama played at least 24 minutes in all 3 of those matchups, and their only victory was by 2 points when Julian Champagnie, no slight to him, fantastic shooter, great role player. He's a winner. But it took him dropping 36 points for you to beat the Knicks the one time this season. And I think that's important to state. And how we talk about matchups and how those lineups kind of compare, it's important to notice that, yes, Wembanyama, he's an alien. No one can defend him for all 48 minutes of a basketball game perfectly. He's going to break loose. He's going to score. He's going to have some play that's going to make your jaw just drop to the floor. But the Knicks have an ace up their sleeve, and that is OG Anunoby, all-NBA second-team defense, all second-team defender, and he is actually the best individual defender on Wembanyama in the entire NBA for players who have guarded him at least 100 possessions over the last 3 years. This is because Wembanyama averages 15 points on 44% true shooting per 75 possessions. Those are not good numbers. Obviously, 15 points, all right, it's not great, but it's not terrible. But the 44% true shooting percentage for a 7'5" big is terrible. And I think a lot of this has to do with OG's length, his athleticism, his ability to play Wemby straight up and even physically move him despite being a good 9 to 10 inches shorter. Additionally, another guy who might be able to play a major factor in the matchup against Wemby is Mitchell Robinson. And that's where that injury comes into play again. He not playing like himself or just not being available in general could force the Knicks, as I said, into playing smaller lineups, which if you play a smaller lineup against Wembanyama, you're just asking for execution. You're just asking for death. It's not going to happen for you. You're not going to win that game. You're not going to win those minutes. And so, though OG Anunoby, yes, he's been an ace on Wembanyama, that hasn't happened where he's been at the 5 necessarily with no other length and height behind him, no Cat, no Robinson behind him. And so I think that could change the piece of the puzzle. Again, the Knicks also have Jeremy Sohan, former Spur. Maybe you could throw him at Wembanyama because of his defensive prowess, length, pretty good rebounder for his size. But again, he's only 6'8", so the height is still a disadvantage. I will say, what if Mitchell Robinson is ready to go? And that is where this conversation becomes a lot more interesting. Well, Mitchell Robinson is the exact type of physical, athletic, and defensive-oriented / glass-cleaning big to physically overwhelm Luke Kornet and just drain Wemby throughout a game. Yes, Robinson doesn't play that many minutes. I think he's averaging around 15 minutes per game in the playoffs. But we saw this in the Cup game where Robinson had 4 points and 15 rebounds in limited minutes, including 10 offensive rebounds. Yes, 10 offensive rebounds in a game against Wembanyama where he just physically overwhelmed him, just moved him out of the way. And I think that though Mitchell Robinson hasn't been that same player yet in this playoffs, and yes, now he's dealing with a broken finger, that physicality and athleticism is still going to be there. And because Mitchell Robinson is not a shooter, you don't rely on him to do any of that. In fact, how much worse could his free throw percentage really get, if we're being honest? But he can still, be that physical force that just annoys Wembanyama, really puts Luke Kornet in a tough position. And he provides the solution to the Knicks' problems of having to go small. Or once again, if Cat puts himself in foul trouble, that you don't have to go to an Ariel Hukporti who's a second-year player and really doesn't play either in the regular season or the playoffs unless the Knicks are up by 30 or they're down by 30. And the Spurs do have some different ways that they can attack the Knicks, but I think that it's also key. We talked about the injuries on the case of the Thunder. The Spurs have a plethora of their own injuries. For example, Dylan Harper, one of the best rookie playoff performers we've seen in a long, long time, especially at the guard position where it takes players a lot longer to adapt to the added pressure, the shorter time span they have to make decisions when facilitating. He has been fantastic, but he's banged up. He hasn't looked the same since that quad injury. And De'Aaron Fox, post-ankle injury, is not quite the blur that we're used to seeing. He's still very effective, and he's still that calming force for the Spurs that they desperately need, that veteran guard alongside Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper. But he's not the same threat to me when you're in the open floor, when you're talking about fast break. He's not going to just blow by every single person on the court or even just blow by you for an easy layup 3 or 4 times a game like he would normally if he's 100% healthy. And when he's not healthy and Dylan Harper is still a little banged up, that means more of an offensive load on De'Aaron Fox, who we talked about, or sorry, not De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, who we've seen turnover problems before. He seems to have corrected it. He did have 20 turnovers in 2 games, the first 2 games of the series against the Thunder. He seemed to have corrected it, but he's going to be asked to do more, and Wembanyama is going to be asked to do more. And I don't think it's an issue necessarily to ask Wembanyama to do more, but you have to wonder, how can a guy's body hold up at 7'5", having to play 35 to 40 minutes a game, and be not only your rim protector, your best defender, literally deter any single drive to the basket, but also be your offensive engine. And so I think that'll be interesting to see if there's any wear and tear on their bodies as, you know, a potential finals matchup goes on, or even tonight in Game 7 against the Thunder. And unlike the Thunder, the Spurs don't have the experience advantage that the Knicks do. I mean, if we take a look at, you know, just the overall roster, yes, the Knicks have 650 roughly playoff games played across their roster, and the Spurs have about 500. So there's a gap, but it's not huge. But then if you kind of limit that, because we know that they have Bismack Biyombo, we know that they have Kelly Olynyk, we know that they have one of the Plumlee brothers at the end of the bench. Those guys have been around the league for years, all a decade plus for each 3 of them. So those guys are going to have a ton of playoff games under their belt. And if we remove those guys and just take a look at their rotation as a whole, outside of Harrison Barnes, I mean, 8 of their primary rotation guys have played in 25 or less playoff games. And for, I would say, 5 to 6 guys, this is their first real playoff run. And yes, they've made it so far. And they're knocking on the doorstep of taking down the defending champs, who have arguably the best experience and the most experience in the playoffs left. But you have to wonder if their youth is eventually going to catch up to them. Another thing I want to talk about when it comes to the Spurs-Knicks matchup is how the Knicks have that perfect counter to pulling Wemby out of that paint and perhaps allowing driving lanes for guys like Josh Hart and for Jalen Brunson to get into the mid-range. And that is because Karl-Anthony Towns has been so effective as a playmaking hub at the top of the key this year, and really in the playoffs, I should say, more so than anything else, that it creates a weird situation for the Spurs. You can either play off of Karl-Anthony Towns or play a guard on him like Stephon Castle or Julian Champagnie or someone like that, and hope that Cat just doesn't feast you alive from up at the top of the key, drilling threes, because he'll have the height advantage, making passes to open cutters. Or you could put Wemby on Cat, but then Wemby is pulled away from the basket, and that opens everything else up for the Knicks offense. So I think that Cat arguably is the most valuable player in this matchup against the Spurs because of his ability to just completely transform everything that the Spurs like to do on the defensive end and what has made them, a historically good defense. And I think that, if we see the Spurs do something that the Cavs tried, where you put Jared Allen, how Jared Allen was guarding Josh Hart, if you put Victor Wembanyama on Josh Hart, and you just hope that Hart doesn't hit enough threes or he doesn't, kill you too much as a playmaker, then it can be effective. And then you minimize the impact that Cat can have on pulling Wemby out of the paint. But the Cavs did it. One game was successful. The next game, Josh Hart had 26 points and hit 5 threes or 6 threes. So it's a gamble. And do you want to potentially gamble away one game just on gamesmanship, just on being like, okay, we hope that he's not going to hit enough threes, even though he shot a career-high 41% from 3 during the regular season? Yes, he has messed up fingers, but Peter Patton, the Knicks shooting coach, got him right. I also wonder that if the Spurs try that, would the Knicks then swap out Hart with Landry Shamet, with Deuce McBride, a guy who's another elite shooter, to where Wembanyama maybe is forced to go guard Cat, and they're going to have to live with playing 4-on-4 everywhere else and not having Wembanyama as the overwhelming deterrent at the rim, or hoping that Wembanyama can make enough of a recovery to still affect majority of the shots that happen inside the arc. But as I said, yes, there's some positives for the Knicks, and there's a lot of ways that they can kind of manipulate this matchup with the Spurs. There are a lot of weaknesses still with the Knicks, and that obviously, lies with the alien or Wembanyama, whatever you want to refer to him as, on the other side. And garnering open looks for Jalen Brunson, I think, could be an issue. I mean, we've just seen the way that Stephon Castle, Dylan Harper, Julian Champagnie, all these guys, Carter Bryant, have limited SGA and made his life so difficult. Jalen Brunson is a very similar player by archetype. He's a guard who likes to get downhill, loves to settle in the mid-range, likes to be physical against his defender. Except for, instead of being 6'7", he's 6'1" or 6'2". So any sort of height advantage or little bit of length advantage that may help SGA in these matchups, Brunson's not going to have. And so it'll be interesting to see, if playing Brunson off ball still has the same level of success, the same effectiveness, or are they just going to have to bank on Brunson not having a great series and the other guys stepping up and being enough of a threat that it doesn't matter if Jalen Brunson doesn't play his best basketball and that Stephon Castle has him in a straitjacket, or that he's struggling and he just has to facilitate. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Additionally, obviously, as we know, Jalen Brunson is not a great defender. Karl-Anthony Towns, you could say that for majority of his career, and really even last year with the Knicks. This year is a different story. So I'm not going to talk about Karl-Anthony Towns as a defensive liability, because all the advanced metrics tell you he's been anything but that. I do want to say that the Spurs three-headed guard lineup could present a lot of matchup issues for Brunson, because where do you hide him? If you put him on Fox, yes, Fox is hampered, but Fox is still probably going to get whatever shot he wants. You can't put him on Castle, because Castle is just so physical and also has the height advantage that I think he'll just bully Brunson for easy layups getting downhill. And then even Dylan Harper, one of the highest rim finishing percentages we've seen, not just by a rookie, but by a guard in a long time. So where do you hide him? You could maybe put him on Julian Champagnie, maybe on Harrison Barnes, and just hope that those two guys don't take advantage of Brunson being so small and purposefully try to attack him. But that always means that the Knicks are arguably going to be playing 5-on-4 on that defensive end unless Brunson can really lock in, take a couple charges, and be a great help defender, and the Knicks are really able to recover anytime that he needs that extra bit of help. Another thing I want to talk about is, yes, Wembanyama has been the best player in the playoffs, and I think that's you can't debate it. His estimated plus-minus is over +9, which is insane. It's in his league of its own. You know who the second best estimated plus-minus is in the league? It's Karl-Anthony Towns. His is 7.3, and not only that, I talked about how his defense has been much improved. You can't call him a defensive liability. He's in the 98th percentile or better on both offense and defense. He's the only player in the playoffs, I believe, that is in that case. I mean, because Wembanyama is 100% in defense, but he's only 96% in offense only. But you know what I mean? So that just shows the impact that Karl-Anthony Towns has had and how he can be the driving force in really any matchup, but specifically this Spurs matchup. It's the first and second most impactful players in the playoffs going head-to-head, and they play the same position. Now that I've had all of that time to explain, a potential matchup between the Knicks and the Thunder, or the Knicks and the Spurs, I think the delineation is clear. The Knicks would rather play the Oklahoma City Thunder. This is largely due to the injuries. Yes, both teams are banged up, but I think that A.J. Mitchell and Jalen Williams being out is much more of a hindrance than a banged-up Dylan Harper and De'Aaron Fox. Additionally, I think that just due to the nature of Wembanyama, he creates a much larger matchup problem than anyone else in this series. Yes, including SGA. SGA is great. He's an all-time offensive weapon, especially what we've seen over the last 2 years where he's won back-to-back MVPs. But the Knicks have significantly more bodies and ways to cover him and force the ball into other Thunder players, which, by the way, as I said, they don't have their secondary creators really that are healthy. And so Wemby would be much more of a headache to deal with. Additionally, while Caruso, Dort, and Cason Wallace are all great defenders in their own right, I think both Cat and Brunson would have an easier time on the offensive and defensive end against the Thunder. And I say all that, though, to state this, which is that both these teams are going to be difficult matchups for the Knicks. I'm not going to sit here and make a prediction right now because I don't know which team they're playing. I will say that if you haven't been watching the Knicks, they have been fantastic, downright historic during this playoff run, during this 11-game win streak this year. And so they will be underdogs, in my opinion, against either the Spurs or the Thunder, no matter who wins tonight in Game 7. But don't count them out. It's going to be a tough, grueling matchup for either team, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Knicks win against either one of those teams, or if either one of those teams takes care of the Knicks. I think that this could be one of the most competitive and entertaining finals we have seen in a very long time. And with that, I just want to thank you all for watching, and what's left is to see what happens on the finals floor. See y'all next time.